Experience the kinetic glow of a life in constant motion, where every action creates a ripple that changes the world forever. Our cinematic visuals capture the heat and the energy of those who lived every moment to the fullest. Hit subscribe now and feel the power of motion. Before I tell you what happened that Sunday afternoon in October, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and down in the comments, let me know what time it is where you're watching from. I like to picture you out there, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down after a long day. It helps me tell the story right. Now, let me set the scene for you. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 63 years old, a retired civil engineer from just outside Charleston, South Carolina. My wife Eleanor passed 3 years ago next March, and since then it's just been me, my Labrador named Biscuit, and my son Nathaniel, who comes over every Sunday for lunch. That tradition started when Nathaniel was 14, and it survived his college years, his first job, his second job, and 3 girlfriends I didn't much care for. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the 4th. Her name was Adrienne Holloway, 29 years old, a lifestyle curator from Atlanta, whatever in God's name that means. Nathaniel had been dating her for about 7 months when he finally asked if he could bring her around for Sunday lunch. Nathaniel is 31, a software architect at a medical technology firm in Mount Pleasant, and he makes a good living. Not Silicon Valley money, but good, comfortable. The kind of comfortable that a woman like Adrienne could smell from 3 states away. The first time I met her, she walked into my kitchen in a white linen dress that probably cost more than my first car, hugged me with the kind of practiced warmth you see from politicians, and told me my home was so charmingly authentic. I smiled, poured her some sweet tea, and made a mental note. Authentic. That's what people say when they mean small. But I didn't judge her that first Sunday. Lord knows I've been wrong about people before. Eleanor used to tell me I was too quick to size folks up, and after she passed, I promised her I'd give every person at my table the benefit of the doubt. So I did. For 4 more Sundays I did. By the 5th Sunday, Nathaniel announced they were engaged. He'd proposed on a rooftop in Savannah with a 3-carat ring that I later learned he'd taken a personal loan to afford. When he told me, I shook his hand, I hugged him, and I said all the right things. Adrienne cried the right kind of tears. She showed me the ring, told me Eleanor would have loved her, and asked if I'd walk her down the aisle since her own father had, quote, passed on to a better place when she was 19. I said it would be my honor. Now, here's where things started getting strange, and I want you to pay attention because looking back, the signs were everywhere. I just wasn't reading them. Over the next 2 months, Nathaniel started looking tired. Not the tired of a man in love, the tired of a man drowning. He stopped coming over on Wednesdays for our usual poker night with the neighbors. He canceled 2 Sundays in a row, claiming Adrienne had family events in Atlanta. When he did come, he was quieter than I'd ever seen him. He picked at his food. He laughed a beat too late at my jokes. And his hands, I noticed this the 3rd Sunday he came alone, his hands shook when he lifted his coffee cup. I asked him if everything was okay. He said everything was fine. I asked him if he was eating. He said Adrienne was putting him on a clean diet for the wedding. I asked him how work was going. He paused, just for a second, and he said, "Dad, work is work." That pause. That was the first thing I filed away. The second thing was the money. Nathaniel had always been careful with money, like I'd taught him. He drove a 5-year-old Toyota. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom condo. He had savings, real savings. We'd talked about his retirement plan when he turned 30, and I knew, to the dollar, what he had set aside. So when I casually asked one Sunday what they were thinking about for a down payment on a house, and he changed the subject, I knew something was wrong. I didn't push. I figured he'd tell me when he was ready. Then came the Sunday of October 12th. It was a beautiful afternoon, the kind of Carolina fall day that makes you forget every hard thing in your life. I'd smoked a pork shoulder for 14 hours. I had collard greens from the garden, cornbread from Eleanor's recipe, and a peach cobbler that I'd put real bourbon in because I was feeling fancy. Nathaniel and Adrienne arrived at 1 o'clock, and Adrienne was wearing a dress I recognized from a magazine at my dentist's office. Cream-colored, belted, the kind of thing that announces itself. She also brought her mother. Nathaniel hadn't mentioned her mother was coming. Neither had Adrienne. The woman, Corinne Holloway, was maybe 55, elegant in that hard, polished way some women get when they've spent too long making sure everyone knows they have money. She carried a designer handbag that I later Googled. $8,000 for a handbag. She kissed the air near both my cheeks, called my home quaint, and sat down at my dining table like she was evaluating a property she might purchase. We made small talk through the appetizers. Corinne asked about my career, nodded politely when I mentioned civil engineering, and then steered every subject back to weddings. She had opinions about flowers. She had opinions about venues. She had opinions about string quartets versus jazz trios, and throughout all of it, Adrian sat there with that practiced smile, and Nathaniel looked like a man waiting for a verdict. Halfway through the pork shoulder, Corinne set down her fork, folded her linen napkin, and said, "Walter, I think it's time we discuss the wedding in earnest." I said, "I'd be happy to, Corinne. What did you have in mind?" She smiled. Adrian smiled. Nathaniel did not smile. "In our family," Corinne began, "weddings are a sacred expression of lineage and legacy. My late husband Harrison, God rest his soul, always said a wedding should reflect the spiritual weight of the union. Adrian has been dreaming of her wedding since she was a little girl. We've been working with a planner in Charleston, and we've put together what we feel is a modest, tasteful event." "That sounds lovely," I said. "What's your budget looking like?" Corinne paused. Adrian reached across and squeezed Nathaniel's hand, which I noticed was white around the knuckles. "Well," Corinne said, "with the venue at Middleton Place, the floral arrangements from Jean-Michel in New York, the couture gown from the Milan designer we've selected, the orchestra, the four-course dinner, the custom fireworks display, and the rehearsal weekend at Kiowa for our 280 guests, we're looking at approximately $1.9 million. I set my fork down. I was about to say something, I'm not sure what. Probably something polite, probably something I'd regret, but I didn't get the chance. Because that's when Nathaniel kicked me under the table. It wasn't a nudge. It was a kick. Hard enough that it startled me. I looked across the table at my son, and for the briefest second, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. Pure, undiluted panic. Then, as smoothly as I've ever seen the boy move, he reached for the breadbasket, and as he passed it toward me, he slipped a folded napkin into my hand. I kept my face neutral. I took the bread. I unfolded the napkin in my lap, below the table line, and I read what my son had written. "Dad, she's running a scam. They've drained me dry. Please play along. I'll explain everything. I'm sorry." Now, I've been in some rooms in my life. I negotiated a highway contract in 1994 against 3 men who were trying to cheat the state of South Carolina out of $11 million. I sat across from a foreman once who pulled a knife on me over a scheduling dispute. I held my wife's hand the night she was told her cancer was terminal. I know how to keep my face still. I folded the napkin. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea, and I looked at Corinne Holloway, and I smiled. $1.9 million, I said. Well, that is certainly a beautiful vision. Adrian let out a breath I don't think she realized she'd been holding. Corinne's shoulders relaxed half an inch. Nathaniel's eyes stayed on his plate. "Now, Corinne," I said, "I want to make sure I understand the arrangement. Your late husband Harrison, as you mentioned, is no longer with us. So I assume the Holloway family's contribution would come from his estate, or from your own resources. Traditionally, of course, the bride's family handles the lion's share of the wedding. I want to be clear on what portion you're proposing I cover." Corinne's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. It was the kind of smile I'd seen across negotiating tables for 40 years, a smile that was about to lie. "Walter," she said, "in our tradition the families merge as one. Harrison's estate is held in trust for Adrian's future children, of course, untouchable. And my own resources are, well, more spiritual than financial these days. We felt that since your son is the one marrying into our legacy, it would be appropriate for the Brennan family to honor the occasion with the financial gift." There it was, spiritual resources. I almost laughed out loud. "I see," I said. "Well, this is a significant conversation. I'd like to think it over. Perhaps we could discuss specifics next Sunday? I want to do right by the kids." "Of course," Corinne said. "We completely understand. A decision of this magnitude requires reflection." Adrian reached across and held my hand. "Walter, thank you for being so open. I know Nathaniel's mother would have loved this. I can feel her here. I'll tell you right now, The restraint it took not to pull my hand back and walk her to the door was the closest thing to a religious experience I've had since Eleanor passed. But I smiled. I thanked her. I served them peach cobbler. And I made sure Nathaniel knew with a single glance that I understood every word on that napkin. They left at 4. Adrian hugged me goodbye. Corinne kissed the air near my face. Nathaniel was the last one out the door, and as he hugged me, he whispered, 9 o'clock tonight. I'll come alone. I'm so sorry, Dad. I spent the next 5 hours sitting on my porch with biscuit at my feet, a glass of bourbon in my hand, and a yellow legal pad across my knees. I didn't drink the bourbon. I didn't pet the dog. I wrote down every single thing I knew about Adrienne Holloway and her mother, and I made a list of every person I knew. At the top of that list was a man named Raymond Chen. Raymond and I went to Clemson together back in the 70s. He was an engineering student who switched to law after his first year. Now he runs one of the best private investigation firms in the Southeast, specializing in financial fraud, matrimonial work, and what he calls situations where someone has come into your family with intentions. I called Raymond at 6:30, and I told him I needed his help by Monday morning. He said, Walter, for you, I'll have a team on it by sunrise. Nathaniel arrived at 9:03. He walked in the door, sat down at the same dining table where that woman had asked me for almost $2 million, and he broke down completely. I have never, in all the 31 years I have known my son, seen him cry the way he cried that night. The boy who didn't cry at his mother's funeral until we were alone in the car afterwards. The boy who got through a broken arm in Little League without a single tear. He sobbed like a child, with his face in his hands, and when he could finally speak, the story came out in pieces. It had started 6 months ago. Adrienne had lost her job at a creative agency in Atlanta, except, Nathaniel would later learn, there was no creative agency. She needed help with rent. $3,000. He covered it. Then her sister in Savannah had a medical emergency. $4,000. He covered that. Then her car needed repairs, $2,200. Then her mother Corinne had a tax issue. $11,000. Then Adrienne had an opportunity to invest in her best friend's startup, an organic skincare line. $25,000. Then there was the engagement itself. Adrienne had casually mentioned she'd always dreamed of a 3-carat ring. Nathaniel took out a personal loan for $40,000, the ring on her finger. Then the wedding planning began. Deposits. So many deposits. Non-refundable deposits. The venue required $30,000 to hold the date. The dress designer required a $15,000 commissioning fee. The florist needed $8,000 up front for seasonal sourcing. The orchestra, the caterer, the photographer Corinne insisted on flying in from Paris. Nathaniel had drained his savings. He had maxed out 3 credit cards. He had borrowed against his 401k. In 6 months, Adrienne Holloway and her mother had extracted, my son estimated through tears, somewhere between $280,000 and $320,000 from him. And now they wanted $1.9 million more. Dad, he said, when he could finally speak clearly, I knew something was wrong 2 months ago, but every time I tried to slow things down, she cried. She told me I didn't love her. She told me her father had abandoned her and I was doing the same thing. And I couldn't do it. And then last Tuesday, I was at her apartment, and she was in the shower, and her phone buzzed, and I saw a text. From a man named Marcus. It said, How's the fish? Still on the hook? He looked up at me. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. Dad, she's not just a gold digger. I think she's a professional. I think they do this for a living. I didn't know what to do. I've been afraid to go to the police because I signed things. I signed so many things. I'm terrified I'm on the hook for contracts with vendors. I was going to come to you tonight anyway. I swear to God. And then her mother sprung that number on us today, and I kicked you, Dad. I'm sorry. It was all I could think to do. I reached across the table and I put my hand on my son's shoulder and I said, Nathaniel, you did the right thing. You came to me. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. Now listen to me carefully. I'm going to take care of this. You're going to keep pretending, just for a week. Can you do that? He nodded. I've already called Raymond Chen. You remember Ray? He's on it. By Friday, we'll know everything. And after that, son, you're going to let your old man handle these women. You understand me? He nodded again. And then he said the thing that nearly broke my heart clean in two. Dad, Mom would be so ashamed of me. I took his face in my hands the way I hadn't done since he was 12 years old. Your mother would not be ashamed of you. Your mother would be angry at the people who did this to you. And son, when I'm done, they are going to understand exactly the kind of family they thought they could play with. Raymond Chen's team worked fast. By Wednesday, I had a preliminary file on my kitchen table. By Friday night, I had a full dossier, and what I read in it made me pour a second glass of bourbon, which I very rarely do. Adrienne Holloway's real name was Adrienne Patricia Kowalski. She was 34 years old, not 29. She had been born in Cleveland, Ohio. Her mother, Corinne Holloway, was actually Patricia Kowalski, age 57. Harrison Holloway, the dearly departed husband who supposedly left behind a spiritual estate, had never existed. Patricia had never been married. The two of them had been running a version of this scheme, in various forms, for the better part of 15 years. There was a paper trail from Columbus, Ohio, where Adrienne, under the name Adrienne Kovacs, had nearly married a dentist named Gerald Finch in 2014 before he wised up and called off the wedding, losing $140,000 in deposits. There was Nashville, Tennessee, where, as Adrienne Haverford, she had extracted around $200,000 from a country music producer named Wade Tremaine between 2017 and 2018. There was Raleigh, North Carolina, where, as Adrienne Sinclair, she had bled a widowed real estate developer named Thomas Marsh for nearly $350,000 in 2020 and 2021, before he died of a heart attack, at which point she vanished, leaving his adult children to untangle the mess. And there was a fourth name in the file, Marcus Delgado. 38 years old, 2 convictions for wire fraud in Florida. Adrienne's actual husband, legally married in a courthouse in Gainesville in 2016, never divorced. He operated as the logistics man, the vendor who would be booked for wedding services with massive non-refundable deposits that would then be laundered back through his shell companies to the 3 of them. The wedding wasn't just a scam for money from my son. The wedding itself, with its $1-million flowers and designer gowns, was the laundering operation. Every vendor on that list was a front company operated by Marcus Delgado. My son, had he married Adrienne, would have found himself legally on the hook for contracts amounting to well over $2 million in obligations to companies that were about to evaporate. The Holloway women would have walked away with the cash. Nathaniel would have been left bankrupt, credit destroyed, possibly facing fraud charges himself for signing contracts with a woman who couldn't legally marry him to begin with. Raymond looked at me across my kitchen table on Friday night and said, "Walter, what do you want to do?" I said, "Ray, I want to do this by the book. Every last piece. I want the FBI involved. I want the state attorney involved. And I want it to happen next Sunday at my dining table." He smiled. "Walter, you always did enjoy a well-scheduled project." The next 6 days were the longest of my life. Nathaniel called Adrienne twice a day, sounding in love, sounding eager, agreeing to everything. Raymond's team coordinated with a federal financial crimes unit that had been building a case on Marcus Delgado for 3 years and couldn't believe their luck. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Charleston signed off on the plan. 2 federal agents were embedded with local marshals, ready to move. On Sunday, October 19th at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Adrienne Kowalski and Patricia Kowalski walked into my home wearing designer clothes and practiced smiles. Nathaniel was already there, pretending to be nervous in the way a happy groom pretends to be nervous. I served them lunch. Chicken piccata, roasted vegetables, a nice white wine. We made small talk. Patricia asked if I had made a decision about the wedding budget. I set down my glass. "I have," I said. "Patricia, Adrienne, I want to tell you both something that I've been thinking about all week. I've come to realize that I've been a fool, a complete fool." Adrienne's face shifted just slightly. The first crack. "You see," I continued, "when I lost Eleanor 3 years ago, I promised her I would always give people the benefit of the doubt. And I have. I've given you the benefit of every single doubt I had. But this week, I did something I haven't done in 40 years of doing business. I actually looked at the numbers." Patricia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I looked at what my son has already given your family. I looked at the contracts he's signed. I looked at the vendors you've selected. I looked at the people behind those vendors." I paused. "And then I looked at you, Patricia Kowalski, and you, Adrienne Kowalski, and your husband, Marcus Delgado." Patricia's fork clattered to her plate. The front door opened. Federal agents do not announce themselves loudly. They just walk in calmly, like they own the room, because in that moment they do. 4 of them, plus 2 U.S. Marshals, plus Raymond Chen, who stood in my doorway and gave me the small nod we had agreed on. Adrian stood up. She actually tried to run. A marshal caught her before she'd cleared the dining room. Patricia, bless her hardened heart, tried a different tactic. This is outrageous. I'm calling my attorney. You have no idea what you're doing. Walter, this is a mistake. These people have made a terrible mistake. The senior federal agent looked at her and said, Patricia Ann Kowalski, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, marriage fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus Delgado was arrested in Atlanta that same afternoon at a property he operated under the name Delacroix Event Sourcing, LLC. Nathaniel watched the whole thing in silence from his chair. When they walked Adrian past him, she turned her head and said, Nathaniel, tell them you love me. My son looked up at her, and for the first time in 6 months, I saw my boy's spine straighten. I thought I loved you, Adrian, but you were never real, so there was nothing to love. She spit at him, missed. A marshal moved her along. The trial took 14 months. Patricia Kowalski was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Adrian Kowalski was sentenced to 9 years. Marcus Delgado, who already had priors, got 14. The federal prosecutors were able to recover around 60% of what Nathaniel had lost through seized assets. The rest he'll earn back. He's 32 years old. He's got time. 4 other victims came forward during the trial. 4 other men, 3 other families who had been taken for over $1 million combined across 6 states. The U.S. attorney sent me a letter afterward, thanking me personally. Said it was the cleanest takedown his office had participated in all year. Nathaniel moved back in with me for a while, broke his lease on the condo, paid it off, started fresh. He's dating someone now, a sweet woman named Caroline, kindergarten teacher. She came to Sunday lunch 2 weeks ago wearing jeans and a t-shirt and brought me a pie from her grandmother's recipe. I love her already. Nathaniel is taking it slow. Smart boy. Raymond Chen still checks in every few months. We had dinner last Friday. He told me something over bourbon that I want to leave you with. He said, Walter, you know what the difference was between your story and the other 4? In every other case, the son or the groom tried to handle it alone. They were too proud, or too ashamed, or too scared to go to their fathers. By the time the families found out, the money was gone and the weddings had happened. Your boy, he kicked you under the table. He slipped you a note. He trusted you enough to ask for help. That's why we got them. I've thought about that a lot. So let me say something to every father, every mother, every grandparent watching this. If your child comes to you in trouble, shaken, ashamed, scared, do not judge them. Do not yell. Do not ask how they could have been so stupid. Just listen. Just be the person they trusted enough to come to. Because pride is the thing these predators count on. Pride is what keeps your child silent. And silence is what makes them victims. My son kicked me under the table because he trusted me to hear him. That trust is the most valuable thing I have ever earned in my life. Eleanor would be proud of him. And I hope she knows I was paying attention after all. If this story meant something to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me about a time you trusted someone with something hard and they came through for you. I read every single one. Until next Sunday, take care of your people, and if something feels wrong at your dinner table, trust that feeling. God bless.